They told my daughter she wasn't family anymore. Not behind closed doors, not in whispers, but at the front steps of my parents' anniversary party, after she flew 5 hours just to be there. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I walked away. And 30 minutes later, my parents were shouting, not with pride, but in panic. See, I used to think I was just the overlooked one, the middle child who couldn't quite measure up. But when they erased my daughter, they erased their last chance to make things right. You think I went too far? Let me tell you the whole story. Caroline adjusted the strap of her dress for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. The heat was making it stick to her skin, but that wasn't what bothered her. She stood beneath the decorative arch wrapped in silk hydrangeas, scanning the driveway with anxious eyes. The crowd around her buzzed with small talk and clinking glasses, but all she could think about was her daughter. Lena was supposed to be here by now. David, her husband, approached carrying 2 paper cups of punch and a slightly strained smile. Their youngest was whining about her shoes again. Their son stood nearby, leaning on a folding chair with the exact expression a 13-year-old wears when dragged to a family event they didn't ask for. "She's cutting it close," Caroline muttered, checking her phone again. No messages, no calls. "Maybe the flight was delayed," David offered. He handed her one of the cups, but she didn't take it. She said she landed before noon, Ubered straight from the airport. I know Caroline's voice was tight. David didn't respond. He knew better than to try soothing her with guesses. Caroline took a slow breath. Lena had picked out her dress 3 weeks ago. She had it dry cleaned. She'd been excited, nervous even. This wasn't just another party. It was her grandparents' 40th anniversary. And after years of subtle distance, Lena had told Caroline, "I want to be there. Maybe it's time." That maybe had echoed in Caroline's mind ever since. She made her way toward the patio where her parents were finalizing the centerpiece placement like generals on a battlefield. Her mother, Elaine, wore her signature pastel suit, hair pinned in perfect curls. Her father clutched a clipboard like someone might try to steal it. "Mom," Caroline said with forced lightness, "has Lena arrived yet? She was supposed to be here an hour ago." Elaine didn't look up from the tablecloth she was smoothing. "Oh, she did. Around noon, I believe." Caroline blinked. "Wait, what? She was here?" "Yes," Elaine said, casually brushing a non-existent crumb off the fabric. "She came a bit early, but we told her it wasn't the right time." Caroline froze. "The right time?" Elaine looked up, her expression neutral. "It's a close family gathering, Caroline." "She is close family," Caroline replied, voice rising. Her father joined in, arms crossed. "We just didn't want any tension today. You know how it can get." Caroline stared at them both, disbelief crawling up her spine. "She flew 5 hours," she whispered. "Paid for it herself. Missed her roommate's birthday party. She brought a gift." Elaine's voice remained even, detached. "We thought it best. She understood." "She understood," Caroline said, stepping back like the words had physically hit her. "You told her. What exactly?" Elaine adjusted a napkin. "That she wasn't really part of the family anymore, not in the same way." Caroline's breath caught. The phrase twisted into her ears like a needle. "Not in the same way," she repeated. No wink, no backtrack, no, "just kidding." Just silence. A scream pressed behind Caroline's ribs, but she didn't let it out. Her arms trembled. The punch in her hand shook. She set it down on the edge of the table and turned to look at David. He was already by her side. "We're leaving," she said quietly. Elaine's head snapped up. "Caroline, don't be dramatic." But Caroline wasn't listening. Her past had just punched its way through the present. She bent down and told her youngest to grab her bag. Her son didn't ask questions. David nodded. They walked away from the celebration without a single word more. The gravel crunched beneath their feet as Caroline and her family crossed the long driveway, each step heavier than the last. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. Her hands were steady now, though her chest still burned with a quiet fury. Behind her, she could hear the murmurs start, chairs creaking, footsteps shifting, the low buzz of whispers catching on the wind. "Caroline!" her mother called, the click of her heels chasing them. "Please don't do this, you're overreacting." David opened the car door for their youngest, who was already pulling at the seatbelt. "We just didn't want any tension," Elaine said, her voice tight with false calm. "It was all a misunderstanding." Caroline turned slowly. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes had hardened. A misunderstanding would be forgetting to tell her the time changed, she said quietly, not turning her away at the door. "She took it well," Elaine added quickly, as if that made it better. "She was very respectful." "That's not the point," Caroline replied, voice clipped. "And you know it." Elaine opened her mouth again, but Caroline had already turned away. She slid into the passenger seat and shut the door. The silence inside the car felt thick, hot, heavy, unbreathable. David started the engine without a word. Their son put on his headphones. Their youngest stared out the window, brow furrowed in confusion but too unsure to ask. Caroline pulled out her phone and stared at the empty screen. No messages. No missed calls from Lena, just silence. She tapped the contact labeled Emily, work, and held the phone to her ear. Her sister picked up on the third ring. "Hey, you okay?" Emily's voice was light, oblivious. "She's not here," Caroline said, skipping pleasantries. A pause. "Wait, what?" "Lena. She came. They turned her away." Another pause. Then softer. "No, that can't be right. Mom told me she couldn't make it." Caroline closed her eyes. The sting behind her lids had nothing to do with heat anymore. "She was there, Emily. She flew in this morning. She bought a gift, and they told her she wasn't family anymore." Emily's breath caught. "Caroline? Are you sure?" "She was standing outside the house while we were arranging centerpieces." A beat. "Jesus," Emily whispered. "I just needed you to know," Caroline said, her voice cracking for the first time. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." But Emily did speak, eventually. "That's disgusting." Caroline didn't respond. Emily exhaled slowly. "Let me talk to James. I'll figure something out." Caroline nodded, though Emily couldn't see it. Her phone slipped into her lap, screen dark. Tension radiated through her body like heat off asphalt. But underneath the fire, something colder stirred, a grief she hadn't felt in years. Not since she was 17, alone in a house where everyone else seemed to move in warm orbits while she spun quietly, unnoticed, on the edge. "I'll text her," David said beside her, breaking the silence. "Lena, just to check in." Caroline nodded again. "She'll call," he added gently. He didn't need to. Because a moment later, her phone buzzed. It was Lena. One line. "Are you free now?" Caroline's hands moved before her mind caught up. She tapped call and held the phone to her ear. Lena picked up on the second ring. "Where are you?" Caroline asked, trying to hold back the shake in her voice. "I'm fine," Lena replied, but her voice wasn't. It was thin, small. "I didn't want to ruin anything," she added. "You didn't ruin anything," Caroline said. "They did. I didn't want you to feel bad. I just wanted you to enjoy the day." Caroline's throat tightened. "Where are you?" she asked again. "Some cafe down the road. I didn't know where else to go." Caroline turned to David. "We're going to pick her up." He was already turning the car around. Caroline was 8 the first time she realized she was invisible. It wasn't some dramatic moment. No slammed doors or shouted insults. It was quieter than that. So quiet, in fact, that it could have been missed if you weren't looking straight at it. But she was. She always was. Nathan, her older brother, had just turned 10 and won the state math competition. There were balloons taped to the door, a "You're Brilliant" banner, and even cupcakes with little calculators on top. Emily, her younger sister by 3 years, had the flu, So naturally, the entire household tiptoed around her room with whispered concern, lavender-scented humidifiers, and bowls of perfectly peeled orange slices. Caroline, however, had brought home a crayon drawing that had been selected for the school's art wall. Her teacher called it impressive perspective for her age. She laid it carefully on the kitchen counter and waited for someone to notice. No one did. Later that evening, when she finally brought it up, her mother smiled absently. "That's nice, honey. But maybe next time, use softer colors. This red's a bit aggressive, don't you think?" The red was the sunset. "Okay," Caroline had whispered. That's when it started. The slow realization that she wasn't special enough to be celebrated or fragile enough to be fussed over. She existed in the between, the middle. Not quite young, not quite old, not quite anything. "You're just more sensitive," her mother would say whenever Caroline flinched at harsh words or cried at things no one else did. "You have to learn not to take everything so personally," her father would add. Even her siblings joined in. "Caroline's just emotional," Nathan said once when she tried to explain how she felt left out. "She thinks everything's about her." Emily, too young to fully understand, would nod and repeat, "Too sensitive," like it was a nickname. It carved itself into her spine. And then there was the theme park incident. She was 12. It was supposed to be a family Saturday. They'd been planning it for weeks. Caroline had even packed her own bag the night before, laying out her favorite shorts and a sweatshirt with her name stitched on the sleeve. But when she woke up that morning, the house was empty. At first, she thought they'd gone to get breakfast. Then, as the hours passed, her chest began to cave in. She called her mother. No answer. She called again, then again. It wasn't until 5 hours later, after she'd eaten cereal alone and paced the living room until her socks wore thin, that the door opened. Her family spilled in, sunburned and laughing, carrying half-eaten cotton candy and prize-stuffed plastic bags. Caroline stood frozen in the hallway. Emily blurted, "I told you we should have brought her." Her mother stiffened. Her father looked mildly guilty. Then Elaine said it. "We just didn't think you'd enjoy it, sweetheart." "You've been in one of your moods lately. It was a high-energy day, and honestly, you weren't really fitting the vibe." Fitting the vibe. Caroline felt her stomach hollow. Later that night, she asked again, "Why?" Her mother's tone was breezy. "You're reading too much into it. Honestly, if this is how you react, maybe we made the right call." So Caroline apologized. She cried into her pillow and told herself to be more agreeable next time. She stopped asking questions. She stopped expecting anything. Because maybe, if she didn't expect, she couldn't be disappointed. She learned to shrink herself down, to make room. For Nathan's awards, for Emily's charm, for the silence in between. Caroline spent most of her teenage years chasing validation like a ghost, trying to prove it was real. She studied hard, aced tests, volunteered at the library, and joined every club that would let her in. She earned certificates, ribbons, and even a local scholarship her senior year. At her high school graduation, she scanned the crowd for her parents during her speech. They were there, somewhere near the back, whispering to each other and checking their watches. After the ceremony, her mother kissed her cheek, then turned to Emily and said, "You'll be up there in a few years, probably valedictorian too." Caroline had been class president, but it was always like that. Her victories were framed as warm-ups for her siblings' futures, her mistakes, headlines. In college, she leaned into independence like it was a religion. She paid her own rent, took extra shifts at the campus bookstore, and learned how to make pasta 3 different ways. Her parents called occasionally, usually to ask about Emily's schedule or Nathan's new promotion. It was in her second year that she met Mark. He wasn't flashy or loud. He didn't brag. He listened, deeply, fully. He laughed with his whole chest and held doors like it mattered. He'd been in the foster system, bounced between homes until he aged out. That history never made him bitter. It made him kind. When Caroline brought him home for the first time, her parents were polite. too polite. Her mother smiled with tight lips. Her father shook hands a little too firmly. So, where's your family from? Elaine asked over dinner. Mark answered honestly, I don't really know. I grew up in a few different places. Elaine tilted her head like studying a specimen. That's unusual. Must have been difficult. It taught me a lot, he said simply. Later that night, as they were cleaning up, Caroline overheard her father in the kitchen whispering, She could do better. It's not like he brings anything to the table. Her mother replied, Let's just be supportive. If we push too hard, she'll cling to him out of spite. They didn't know Caroline was standing in the hallway, holding a plate and biting her tongue so hard it bled. Still, she stayed with Mark. She married him at 22 in a small ceremony behind their apartment complex. Her parents came, but they brought the energy of mourners instead of celebrants. They gave a gift, a $50 gift card with a note that read, Best wishes for your future. Not congratulations, not we're proud of you, just best wishes. When Caroline gave birth to Lena a year later, she hoped it might be the bridge, something that would finally make her family look at her, at them, and see worth. Mark built the crib himself. He stayed up every night rocking Lena when she cried. He cooked meals so Caroline could nap. He was gentle and steady, and everything Caroline had needed growing up. But her parents still saw absence where there was abundance. At Lena's first birthday, her grandparents brought a plastic toy that still had the clearance sticker on the box. Meanwhile, Nathan's son received a custom-made rocking horse. Caroline said nothing, until one Thanksgiving, when she overheard her mother on the phone with a cousin. She married a man with no roots, Elaine said. It's no surprise they're struggling. I mean, we do our best, but it's not easy supporting someone who brings so little to the table. That phrase again, brings so little. Mark was standing in the kitchen when Caroline walked in, tears slipping down her cheeks. He didn't ask what was wrong, he just held her. And in that moment, she realized her family hadn't accepted him. They'd accepted pretending to accept him. They never saw his worth. And worst of all, she had spent years hoping they would. When Lena was born, Caroline allowed herself to believe, just for a moment, that things might be different. Maybe a baby would soften them. Maybe watching her cradle this tiny human would remind her parents that love wasn't about lineage or expectations. It was about presence, warmth, the willingness to show up. Mark was thrilled. He cried when he held Lena for the first time, whispering promises into her tuft of dark hair. Caroline sat in the hospital bed watching him, thinking, This is what family looks like. Elaine and Caroline's father visited once, just long enough to take a few photos and comment on how tiny Lena was. They brought a store-bought bouquet and a blue card that said, It's a boy, with boy awkwardly crossed out. We couldn't find another one, Elaine explained flatly. It's the thought that counts. The thought, Caroline noted, was evidently minimal. Still, Lena grew. She was a quiet child, observant. The kind who watched before speaking, listened before acting. She liked to sort her crayons by shade, fold her socks a certain way, and eat grilled cheese in perfect triangles. She was thoughtful, often handing Caroline drawings with captions like, To Mommy, because you are cozy like blankets. But even as a toddler, Lena seemed to understand her place in the family dynamic. During family gatherings, she clung to Caroline's leg while her cousins ran around, laughing and shouting. No one told her to join in. No one reached out a hand. At one birthday party, Elaine passed out goodie bags with everyone's name carefully written in glittery script. Lena's said nothing, just a sticker that read, Guest. Caroline noticed, of course. So did Lena. She didn't cry. She just tucked the bag under her chair and stared out the window. Caroline tried to talk to her mother about it. She's a shy kid, Elaine said with a shrug. You shouldn't project your old insecurities onto her. She's 4, Caroline replied. She notices everything. Elaine sighed. You've always made mountains out of molehills. Caroline bit her tongue. again. She always seemed to be biting something back. The worst was Christmas. It was the first holiday after Mark lost his job. Money was tight, but Caroline had saved all year to make sure Lena wouldn't feel it. They arrived at her parents' house with homemade cookies and hand-painted ornaments Lena had worked on for weeks. She'd drawn names on each one: Grandma, Grandpa, Auntie Em, Uncle Nate. Caroline watched as her mother accepted the box with a perfunctory smile, barely glancing inside. Later, when the gifts were distributed, each grandchild received a personalized item. Nathan's son got a model train engraved with his initials. Emily's twins opened matching backpacks with their names stitched in gold thread. Lena received a glass ornament, one of those generic ones from a big box store with joy written in block letters. No name, no ribbon, no tag, just joy. Lena held it in her palm for a long time. Caroline sat frozen, unsure whether to scream or weep. When she finally confronted her mother, Elaine waved it off. We weren't sure what she was into. You know how quiet she is. It's hard to shop for a kid like that. She's into stickers and grilled cheese and puzzles and that cat cartoon she draws all over the place, Caroline snapped. Elaine blinked. Well, we can't get it right every time. Don't take everything so personally. That line. Again. Caroline reached for Lena's small hand. Lena looked up and smiled, soft and forgiving. Caroline didn't deserve that kind of grace, but she vowed then and there she'd protect it, even if it meant standing alone. The marriage with Mark didn't end in fire or screaming. It ended in slow silence. The kind of silence that creeps into the space between words, then settles like dust. They'd simply changed, grown in different directions. He got a job in another city, and Caroline stayed for Lena's school, her friends, her stability. They co-parented with respect. No bitterness, no legal battles. Lena was 8. A year later, Caroline met David. He was everything her parents thought a man should be. Steady job, clean haircut, button-downs on Sundays. He was patient, good with the kids, made smart jokes that her father actually laughed at. Caroline didn't love him the way she'd loved Mark, wildly, fearfully, like it might collapse at any second. With David, love was quieter, built on routines and steady mornings. She thought maybe quiet was good. Maybe safe was what she needed. Elaine was ecstatic. You finally made a wise choice, she told Caroline over brunch one day, clinking her mimosa glass like it was a toast to redemption. Her father nodded. We're proud of you. You really turned your life around. Caroline almost choked on her eggs. Turned your life around? Like Lena was part of the detour she was never meant to take. David had 2 kids from a previous marriage, twins, a boy and girl. They were charming, photogenic, and fit seamlessly into the family mold. Caroline loved them. She really did, but even she couldn't help noticing how her parents seemed to love them more. At holidays, the twins got prime seats at the table. Lena was often asked to make room or help with the younger kids. At birthdays, the twins received wrapped gifts with their names in cursive tags. Lena got envelopes, gift cards, always the same $25 to a bookstore that had closed 2 years ago. Caroline tried to rationalize it. Her parents were old, tired. Maybe they just didn't understand teenagers. But deep down, she knew. They hadn't changed. They had simply found new favorites. One afternoon, while helping Elaine organize paperwork for an estate planning meeting, Caroline stumbled across a document. It was a preliminary list: assets, distributions, future arrangements. She skimmed, not meaning to pry, just curious. Her name was there. Nathan's, Emily's. The twins, David's children, were listed under grandchildren. So were Emily's kids and Nathan's, but not Lena. Lena's name was nowhere. Caroline stared at the page, blinking hard. She flipped to the next one, then the next. Nothing. She tried to keep her voice calm. Hey, Mom, I don't see Lena's name on here. Elaine didn't look up. Oh, that's just a draft. But she's not in any of the drafts? Elaine hesitated, then gave that smile Caroline hated, the one that meant I'm lying but trying not to. Well, we thought... given everything, she's not really around as much. And it gets complicated, legally with step-grandkids and all. She's not a step-grandkid, she's your first grandchild. Elaine finally looked up. Caroline, please don't make this about you. It's not about me, Caroline said quietly. It's about her. Elaine returned to her papers, smoothing the corners. We just wanted to keep things clean, simple. Clean, simple. Caroline left early that day, claiming a headache. She went home and watched Lena do her homework at the kitchen table, headphones in, legs tucked underneath her like always. She wondered what it felt like to carry that much rejection and still show up with such grace. She didn't tell Lena about the will. Not yet. Some truths could wait until Caroline figured out how to carry them properly. But one thing became clear that day. Her parents hadn't just written Lena out of a document. They'd erased her in their minds a long time ago. The email arrived on a gray Thursday morning. Caroline had just finished packing school lunches when her phone buzzed. The subject line read, 40th anniversary, planning thread. She opened it while sipping lukewarm coffee, expecting a list of tasks or maybe a request for food contributions. Instead, she blinked twice at what she saw. Her name was listed among the primary organizers. Even more shocking, Lena's name was included too, right there, below her cousin's, next to the phrase, invited family. Caroline stared at it for a long moment, unsure whether to smile or brace for impact. It had been years since her parents had acknowledged Lena in any real way. Polite nods at family dinners, quick greetings on holidays, nothing more. But this looked like effort, inclusion. She reread the line again, then cautiously let hope creep in. That afternoon, she called Lena. You were on the anniversary email, she said, voice light but cautious. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then Lena said, Really? Yeah, it looks like they're trying. I mean, okay, Lena said, skeptical but not dismissive. If you think I should go, I'll go. Caroline smiled faintly. Only if you want to. I'll think about it, Lena replied. But Caroline could tell she already was. The following weeks were full of preparation. Caroline contributed financially without hesitation. She helped select a playlist of old songs from her parents' dating years, scanned photos for the slideshow, and even stitched together a few stories from her childhood to include in the printed program. It felt like healing, slow, tentative healing. Emily offered to help with logistics, and even Nathan, aloof as ever, forwarded a few venue suggestions. Caroline texted Lena updates along the way. They're planning a big toast. Your grandfather's writing new vows. There's going to be a photo wall. Maybe pick one of you and Grandma to include. Lena responded with simple, okay and will do messages, but Caroline knew she was trying. They both were. It wasn't perfect, but it felt possible. Then one night, while folding laundry, Caroline's phone buzzed with a message from Emily. At first it looked like a mistake, a screenshot of a text thread, unlabeled, but then Caroline saw it clearly. Elaine, don't mention Lena to Caroline. Let her think she's been included. No reason to stir anything up now. Caroline stared at the message, her breath caught halfway between inhale and disbelief. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She read it again. Let her think, not include her, not support her, just let her think she was welcome. Caroline didn't respond to Emily. She didn't say anything at all. She just folded the towel in her lap, slowly, mechanically, while her pulse pounded in her ears. It all made sense. Why no one responded to Lena's RSVP, why no one added her photo to the draft wall, why she wasn't assigned a table in the seating chart. They never intended to include her. They had included her on the email to placate Caroline, to give her hope, to keep her quiet. It wasn't healing, it was illusion. Smoke and mirrors wrapped in calligraphy invitations. That night, Caroline lay awake staring at the ceiling, playing through a dozen conversations she might have, a dozen ways to ask why, a dozen ways to pretend this didn't hurt like hell. But the truth stayed steady in her chest, like a nail. They hadn't changed. Not really. They had just gotten better at dressing up the exclusion. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m., but by 1:30, Caroline's dress was damp with sweat beneath her arms. She stood beneath a balloon arch, smiling at guests, answering small talk with practiced grace. But her eyes kept flicking toward the street. No Lena. David handed her a water bottle and whispered, "She'll be here." Caroline nodded, but her stomach twisted. At 1:47, she slipped behind the house and called her mother, hoping for reassurance. Instead, she found her by the catering table, adjusting candles and fiddling with a seating chart. "Have you seen Lena?" Caroline asked. Elaine didn't look up. "Oh, she came earlier." "What?" Caroline blinked. "She was here?" "Around noon, I think." "Where is she now?" Elaine gave a short sigh. "We asked her to leave." Caroline's heart stopped. "I beg your pardon?" "It's a private event," Elaine said, calm and composed. "Close family only." "She is close family." Elaine finally looked at her. Not in the same way. The same sentence. The exact same one. Not in the same way. Caroline didn't remember walking away. She only remembered the silence in her ears, the dull roar of her pulse, the way her feet felt miles away from the rest of her body. She found David, told him they were leaving. There were protests. Her father stepped forward with furrowed brows, saying something about not ruining the moment. Elaine whispered, "Please don't do this in front of everyone." But Caroline didn't raise her voice, didn't cry. She just walked. Once inside the car, she dialed Lena. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. Then a message lit her screen. "Are you free now?" Caroline called instantly. Lena answered after 2 rings. "Where are you?" Caroline asked. "A cafe down the road. I didn't want to cause a scene." "You didn't cause anything," Caroline said. There was a pause. "I'm sorry," Lena whispered. Caroline's voice cracked. "For what?" "For showing up. For making you look bad. I didn't realize I just thought, since I got the email, you don't have to apologize," Caroline said, but Lena continued. "I didn't want to make things uncomfortable. I just thought it might be different this time." That broke something inside her. "We're coming to you," Caroline said. David was already pulling out of the driveway. They found Lena sitting alone by a window, hands wrapped around a mug of something that had long since gone cold. Her dress was wrinkled, her hair slightly windblown from waiting outside. She stood when they walked in, hesitated, then said, "Hi," like none of it mattered. Caroline hugged her hard. Lena didn't resist. They sat, ordered fries. No one ate. Lena finally said, "They told me I wasn't family. That's what they said. Word for word." David clenched his jaw. Caroline's eyes burned. "I didn't want to ruin it for you," Lena added. "I just thought maybe I should have stayed home." Caroline reached across the table and took her hand. "You were never the problem," she said. Lena looked down, her voice barely audible. "I know, I'm used to it." "I'm used to it." 7 syllables that shattered everything Caroline had tried to build. Her daughter wasn't just wounded, she was conditioned. Conditioned to expect rejection. Conditioned to carry it quietly. Conditioned because of them. Because of her. Caroline swallowed hard. It was no longer about inclusion, it was about protection. They stayed at the cafe longer than any of them expected, just sitting, not eating, letting the silence say what words couldn't. Lena picked at a napkin until it shredded. David scrolled his phone, pretending to be calm. Caroline stared out the window, jaw tight, mind burning. Then without a word, she picked up her phone and called Nathan. It rang twice before he answered, voice brisk. "Caroline, where are you? Everyone's asking." "We left," she interrupted, sharp and steady. A pause. "What do you mean, left?" "I mean, we walked out. Lena was turned away." Nathan huffed. "Are you serious?" "She was told she's not part of the family." "That's not exactly what happened." She was at the door, Nathan. Another pause. Then a sigh, like he was tired of a child misbehaving. They just didn't want drama, Caroline. You know how Mom is about events like this. She's not a wedding planner, Nathan. She's our mother. And she slammed the door in her granddaughter's face. Nathan's voice rose. Oh, come on. Don't twist this into some sob story. Lena doesn't belong in this event. It's a family thing. She is family. She's not blood. That stopped her. What? Nathan didn't pause this time. She's not related to us. She's Mark's kid, not ours, not Dad's, not part of our line. It was better this way. Caroline felt her chest hollow. You've always been too soft, Nathan continued, always making things emotional, always dragging us into guilt trips. Look, I'm sorry she was hurt, but it's not like we haven't been clear. Caroline's hand tightened around the phone. Not clear to me, she said, low and cold. Come on, Nathan scoffed. You act like this is some great betrayal. It's just boundaries. You of all people should understand. You were the one who brought all this into the family. All this, Mark, Lena, her entire life outside their mold. You said I brought this into the family, she repeated, like I smuggled in contraband. I'm saying you chose that path, Caroline. You made choices. We all have to live with ours. She stood up from the cafe booth so quickly her chair scraped the floor. David looked up, alarmed. Nathan kept going, unaware. It was the right call. Lena doesn't belong. She never really did. She's not one of us. She's not... Don't finish that sentence, Caroline snapped. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from fury. Nathan laughed bitterly. So what now? You're going to excommunicate us because of this one thing? This wasn't one thing, she said. It's been my whole life. Every holiday, every sideways comment, every, you're too sensitive. Every time you all looked through me like I was fog on glass. Silence. I stayed quiet so long I started to believe you were right, she added, but I don't anymore. You didn't just push Lena out. You pushed me out too. You've been doing it for decades. Nathan's voice dropped. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Caroline's laugh was sharp. You think this is proportion? My daughter thinks she should apologize for being rejected. She thinks love is earned. She thinks being invisible is normal. And that's on you, all of you. Don't lecture me. Then hang up. I'm trying to keep peace. There's no peace in pretending we're okay. More silence. Then, you're going to regret this. I already regret not walking away sooner. She hung up before he could speak again. David reached over, gently pulled the phone from her hand and set it on the table. Lena looked up at her, wide-eyed. Are you okay? She asked. Caroline nodded, but her throat ached with unshed emotion. I talked to Nathan. And? He thinks they did the right thing. Lena's expression didn't change. That was the worst part. There was no surprise, no gasp, just resignation, like she'd already known. Caroline sat back down, heart pounding. They don't deserve you, she said quietly. They never did. David placed his hand over hers. What now? Caroline looked at Lena, then back at him. We stopped asking for seats at tables that were never built for us. The day after the anniversary, the silence was deafening. Caroline didn't receive a single call from her parents, not a message, not even a vague apology. Instead, what she did receive was an email, an invoice. It was cold and precise. Your share of the celebration expenses, $3,625 due by the end of the month. No greeting, no signature, just numbers. Caroline stared at the email for a full 5 minutes before deleting it. She wasn't paying, not this time, not for being humiliated, not for watching her daughter's heart crack open, not for playing the role of the dutiful middle child who knew better than to speak up. She closed her laptop and stood from the table, adrenaline pushing through her like wildfire. But instead of pacing, instead of ranting to David, she called Ruth. Emily Ruth, technically, but everyone just called her Ruth, her younger sister, the baby, the golden one, at least back then. She picked up on the first ring. Hey, Ruth said, voice tentative. I was going to call you. You heard? I left early, Ruth replied. I saw you were gone, asked Mom what happened. She told me Lena didn't show, that you were overreacting. Caroline felt her chest tighten. She said Lena didn't show? Yeah, that she never RSVP'd, that you'd gotten emotional about a miscommunication. Caroline scoffed, more bitter than amused. She was there, got turned away. They told her she wasn't part of the family. There was a long pause. Then Ruth said very quietly, Jesus Christ. They've always been like this, Caroline said. You know that. I didn't want to, Ruth admitted. I think I let myself believe they were just clumsy, not cruel. Another pause. I'm not paying, Caroline said. For the party. I got an invoice. So did I. They can send all the bills they want. I'm not putting a single dollar toward being erased. Ruth didn't respond immediately. Then, good. Caroline blinked. Good? I'm not paying either. A breath caught in Caroline's throat. Really? Yeah, I thought I was just being dramatic, Ruth said. But now I think, maybe you were right. About everything. Caroline sank into the couch, her voice suddenly softer. I spent so long trying to believe they loved us all the same. I used to, Ruth admitted. I thought you just overreacted. I believed them when they said you were too sensitive. There it was again, that old wound. You weren't, Ruth added quickly. You weren't wrong. They just made you feel like you were. Caroline exhaled slow and heavy. And now they want us to pay for the party, she said. A party that excluded your daughter and humiliated mine. They don't see it, Ruth said. They never did. They don't want to. There was silence, but it wasn't heavy this time. It felt aligned, shared. Do you remember Mom's birthday dinner in 2015? Ruth asked suddenly. Caroline furrowed her brow. The one where you showed up late? Yeah. She told me not to mention the gift, said you hadn't contributed and would be embarrassed. Caroline blinked. I paid for half that necklace. I know, Ruth said. She told me later. When I asked why, you seemed upset. She said, Caroline always wants credit for things she barely does. Caroline felt like the ground shifted under her. She's been rewriting history, Ruth continued. All these years making you the selfish one. Caroline couldn't speak. And I went along with it, Ruth said. I'm sorry. Caroline finally found her voice. You didn't know. I should have asked more questions. You're asking now. Ruth let out a shaky breath. What do we do? Caroline sat forward as if the act of moving could bring clarity. We stopped pretending. Ruth didn't argue. I think they expect us to cave, Caroline said. They've trained us to keep the peace, to be polite, to absorb. Not this time. They left Lena out of the will. What? I found the draft months ago. She wasn't on it, but David's kids were. Ruth cursed under her breath. She's their granddaughter. They said it was easier to keep it clean. Ruth's voice turned cold. They've erased you twice now. Caroline nodded, her mouth dry. I want to protect her, she said, but I also want to fight. You don't have to choose. Caroline looked out the window. Then let's do both. Caroline stared at her phone as it buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a message from a distant cousin, one she wasn't especially close with. The text was casual, but it stopped her in place. Hey, heard about the anniversary. Mom says it was all just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. As if turning her granddaughter away multiple times, gaslighting their own family, and billing the children afterward could be brushed aside that easily. She deleted the message without replying and felt bile rise in her throat. David walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He saw her stare at the phone. Need to ignore that one, he said gently, handing her a mug. Yeah, Caroline muttered. I don't need fake sympathy. She took a sip, the bitterness fitting. A few hours later, her phone buzzed again. It was Colin, Nathan's eldest, sending a Venmo request. The amount? $3,125. Your share of expenses, the memo read. Caroline stared at the number for long seconds. She couldn't recall exactly how much she had contributed in the planning phase. They had pooled money for decor, photographers, venue rental, but had she expected a bill after all that emotional wreckage? She shook her head. She wasn't paying. Not this time. Not ever again. Before she could reply, Colin sent a follow-up. Dad's swamped. We had to cover most of the venue deposit last minute. Not sure how else to do it. Family. Her grip tightened on her mug. Family. She stood up, her legs rigid beneath her. She dialed his number and pressed the phone to her ear. He picked up after a few rings. "What is this?" she asked, voice restrained. "Caroline," he started. "We needed the money." Needed the money. For what? Her reply came faster than she intended. "For the celebration," he said. "Your parents. They fronted everything, and we couldn't get it done last minute." His tone sounded rehearsed, as if he'd been coached. "What? My parents paid first? After kicking Lena out? After this whole mess?" He hesitated, swallowing. "They told me not to worry. You'd cover your part." "That's not how it works. You don't pay for your own humiliation." Colin let out a laugh, harsh and hollow. "Come on, Caroline. You know how our parents get. They don't talk about their finances, but this was supposed to be the big do-over, new image, new legacy." "Legacy?" Caroline repeated the word like it tasted sour. "Costing my daughter? Her sense of love? Her heritage?" "There were invoices," Colin admitted. "They told us individually, no group conversation." Twist 11. Caroline realized with sinking dread that her parents had deliberately schemed to hand the financial burden of a family-wide celebration onto their children, while simultaneously rewriting the family narrative. Her voice was icy, calm. "You let them do that?" "We didn't have much of a choice," he said, pathetic. "And now I'm supposed to pay?" "Please, Caroline, family. Family." She slammed the phone down before he could respond. The coffee in her hands was cold now. She pressed both palms to the counter, feeling as though it might collapse beneath her. David appeared behind her. "What did he want?" "Nope," she said. "Not paying. Not this time." He nodded. A distant memory flickered. Countless holidays where Caroline's parents paid for everything, but subtly, invisibly, inserted debts into her heart. It was emotional debt, unspoken demands that loyalty meant payment, that gratitude meant surrender, and that forgiveness came with a bill. Now it was literal. She turned to David. "I want to go see Ruth. Figure it out. Together." "Of course." They drove in silence to Ruth's house, the air between them thick with unspoken grief and determination. She found Ruth in the kitchen, making tea. They sat, and Caroline told her everything. The message, the invoice, Colin's call. Ruth closed her eyes. When she opened them, her expression was resolute. "They can keep trying to bankrupt us. We can refuse." Caroline nodded. "We walk away," Ruth said. "We stop paying. We create our own legacy. Together." Caroline gathered strength from those words. For the first time in years, she felt anchored, not by obligation, but by belonging. They came on a Tuesday afternoon, unexpected but not unannounced. Caroline spotted the familiar sedan pulling up outside through the kitchen window. She didn't move. She just stared as her parents stepped out, dressed as if for an event. Her mother in a pressed blouse, her father in one of his serious blazers, the one he wore to weddings and difficult conversations. David entered the kitchen and said softly, "Do you want me to answer?" "No," Caroline said, setting down the dish rag. "This one's mine." She opened the door just as her mother raised her hand to knock. "Caroline," Elaine said, giving a brittle smile. "We were hoping to speak with Lena." Caroline blinked. "You came here to see Lena?" Her father nodded, clearing his throat. "Just a conversation, to clear the air." No ambush. We just thought, maybe we should talk. Caroline crossed her arms. Did you think about that before you told her she wasn't family? Elaine flinched. It was a complicated day. Emotions ran high. She stood on your doorstep and you closed it. Her mother's face hardened. We came to make peace. Caroline stepped aside, unsure why. Maybe to witness what would happen when a wound spoke back. Lena, she called upstairs. You okay to come down? Her daughter appeared moments later, calm, barefoot, in leggings and an oversized hoodie. She glanced at Caroline, then walked slowly toward the door. Elaine lit up like nothing had happened. Sweetheart, we just wanted to see you. Lena didn't smile. She stood on the threshold, arms crossed lightly, but her face unreadable. We never meant to hurt you, her grandfather said, voice low. It was all a misunderstanding. We've always cared about you, Elaine added. Things got out of hand. Lena listened in silence. Caroline watched from behind, ready to step in, to shield. But then Lena did something unexpected. She shook her head gently. I'm not mad, she said. Elaine brightened, hopeful. I'm just done. Silence. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't cruel. But it cut deeper than anything Caroline had ever said. I don't want to keep trying for people who don't try back, Lena added, her voice quiet but unwavering. You've made it clear over and over again how you see me, and I finally believe you. Her grandmother looked stunned. Her grandfather's jaw clenched, as if swallowing pride was physically painful. Elaine stepped forward. We were confused. Things got miscommunicated. You're taking it too personally. Lena didn't flinch. That's what you always say, to my mom, to me, but it's not personal. It's a pattern. Her voice shook for the first time. You didn't forget me once. You left me out every time. And I tried to be okay with it. I tried so hard to be small enough not to take up space, but I'm tired, and I'm not going to shrink anymore. Elaine's lips parted, but no words came out. Her grandfather looked at Caroline as if begging for intervention, but Caroline didn't move. For the first time in Lena's life, she didn't need her mother to defend her. She was defending herself, and it was the most powerful thing Caroline had ever seen. Elaine finally said, Well, if that's how you feel. It is, Lena replied. Her father muttered, We tried. No, Lena corrected. You came to make yourselves feel better, not to make anything right. Caroline stepped forward then, not to fight, not to protect, but to stand beside her daughter. We're done here, she said simply. Elaine looked like she might cry. Her father looked like he might explode, but neither of them said another word. They turned, walked to the car, and drove off without looking back. When the door shut behind them, Lena turned to Caroline. You okay? She asked. Caroline laughed softly. I was about to ask you the same. Lena shrugged. I feel free. Caroline nodded, her throat thick. For years, she had tried to teach Lena how to navigate a broken family. But in the end, it was Lena who taught her what it looked like to walk away with dignity intact. And for the first time, Caroline understood that the cycle had truly ended. It had been quiet for a few weeks. No calls, no invoices, no sudden family interventions. Caroline spent the time healing, leaning into ordinary moments, Lena's laughter at a movie, David humming while folding laundry, quiet coffee mornings that didn't come with emotional bills. And then, one Sunday afternoon, Colin showed up. No warning, no text, just a knock at the door. Caroline answered, surprised to find him standing there. Creased shirt, dark circles under his eyes, and a folder tucked under one arm. He looked exhausted, not just physically, but existentially, like someone who'd spent his life running towards something, only to find out it wasn't real. Can I come in? He asked. Caroline didn't move. Why? I need to talk. She studied him, not with anger, with curiosity, then quietly stepped aside. He entered stiffly, like he expected to be tackled by judgment. Caroline led him to the dining room table, where the air felt heavier than usual. David looked up from his book, eyebrow raised. Colin nodded politely. "I'll give you 2 a minute," David said, standing and disappearing upstairs. Colin set the folder down with a thud. "It's about the estate." Caroline didn't speak. She let the silence stretch. Colin opened the folder. "There is no estate." She blinked. He continued, voice tight. "They overspent. For years. Travel, furniture, loan after loan. The house is still mortgaged, twice. There's nothing to divide, just debt. And they listed me as responsible for most of it." Caroline sat back, processing. "No trust fund," he said bitterly. "No college accounts for the grandkids. No retirement cushion, just illusions." She wasn't surprised, just oddly relieved. "All this time," he added, "they talked about legacy, about protecting what we built." "They meant what they built," Caroline corrected gently, "and even that was fantasy." Colin rubbed his temples. "I kept believing I'd inherit something, that it would be worth it." "Worth the silence?" He looked up at her, eyes flashing. "I defended them. I defended them to you, to Ruth, to everyone. And now I'm stuck with nothing but creditors and funeral plans." Caroline didn't gloat. She didn't nod with satisfaction. She only said, "We tried to tell you. I thought you were being dramatic." "No," she replied softly. "We were just done being obedient." He exhaled hard, slumping in the chair. "Do you think they ever loved us?" Caroline tilted her head. "Maybe in their way, but love without empathy isn't love. It's control." Colin looked down at his hands, palms open. "I thought I was the favorite." "You were. Then why lie to me too?" She smiled faintly. "Because control isn't loyalty. It's ownership. And when you became useful, they invested. When you became inconvenient, they left me with the receipts." They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he said, "I don't know what to do." Caroline stood, walked to the kitchen, and returned with a small stack of papers. Her copy of the original estate planning email chain, the invoice, the screenshots from Emily, the text from her cousin. She placed them in front of him. "This is what they do." Colin looked at the stack. "You've been keeping track." "No," she said. "I've just stopped pretending." He nodded slowly, like it physically hurt to agree with her. "So what now?" he asked. Caroline's eyes were calm. "Now you get to decide who you want to be without them." Caroline didn't feel victorious. There was no fist pump, no shouted, "I told you so." There was only quiet, a stillness inside her that felt clean. She hadn't burned the bridge. They had. She had simply chosen not to swim back toward the smoke. Colin left that day hollow-eyed and slower in speech than he'd arrived. Maybe something had shifted in him, maybe not. Caroline didn't hinge her piece on what he would do next. She'd finally stopped asking for apologies. The weeks passed in calm rhythm. Lena graduated from college in a simple ceremony. No fanfare, no banners, just smiles and hugs and happy tears. She wore a soft green dress beneath her gown, the one she had thrifted herself because it felt like growth. Caroline and David sat in the audience, hands clasped, watching her stride across the stage with the poise of someone who no longer waited for approval. After the ceremony, they went out for pancakes. They laughed. They didn't speak of missing grandparents or empty seats or who might have been proud. Pride, after all, didn't need to be performed to exist. Lena moved into a small studio apartment downtown a few weeks later. She filled it with secondhand books, hand-painted mugs, and sunlight. Caroline helped her pick out curtains. David installed shelves. They ordered greasy pizza and danced to 80s music while hammering nails into drywall. And for the first time in decades, Caroline felt untethered from the script she was supposed to follow. She didn't feel bitter. She felt free. It was Ruth who sent the photo. It arrived without context one Friday morning, just an image in Caroline's messages. The vow renewal. Dozens of white folding chairs, candles in vases, a makeshift altar under strings of fairy lights, but front and center, 3 rows stood completely empty, just empty chairs and a lone violinist, bow mid-air. Caroline stared at the image for a long time, then scrolled down. Ruth. They called it a misunderstanding. No one clapped at the vows. It sounded like closing time at a mall. Caroline smiled sadly. She didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. She closed the message and stepped outside to the garden, where a few stubborn tulips had bloomed despite the frost. She breathed in the air. It smelled like soil and something just shy of rain. Lena called later that night. "Mom," she said, "you doing okay?" "I am," Caroline replied. "You sound different." "I think I finally believe I deserved better." Lena paused. "You did." They stayed on the line a while, talking about furniture and deadlines and podcasts. When the call ended, Caroline sat in the dark living room for a while, letting the silence wrap around her. Not heavy, not lonely, just hers. She thought about that phrase again, the one that had started it all. "You're not family anymore." They'd said it to her daughter without flinching. And in doing so, they had stripped themselves of something more precious than any heirloom. They hadn't just erased Lena, they'd erased everyone who might have stood beside them, everyone who might have loved them anyway. Caroline leaned back on the couch, closed her eyes, and let herself feel the strange, warm ache of something that had ended and something else that had finally, truly begun.